Welcome to Screwtape Letters, letter 16. So letter 16 is all about the church and different physical churches and the patient's attendance of church. So to start this letter off, I did want to draw one kind of distinction here. So C.S. Lewis was actually not a Catholic. C.S. Lewis was a very faithful Orthodox Anglican. The Anglican Church is very, very similar to the Catholic Church, especially in C.S. Lewis's time. It was very, very close and similar. There were many Catholic doctrines that C.S. Lewis did believe in. He had a devotion to Mary. He prayed to the saints. He believed in purgatory. He went to communion daily and went to confession very, very often. And again, the Anglican Church is very, very close to the Catholic Church. And there's obviously a lot of speculation for why C.S. Lewis didn't enter the faith, the Catholic faith. He's actually led a lot of people to convert to Catholicism through his writings. But one of the largest arguments is that he was from Northern Ireland. And as I don't know if you know or not, but there's a great feud in Ireland between Catholics and Protestants. And so North was Protestant, Southern Ireland was Catholic, and so it had just been, kind of, I guess, not beaten into him literally, but, kind of through his family that, they shouldn't have anything to do with papists and with Catholics and whatnot. So I just wanted to mention that because especially in this letter, as C.S. Lewis is going to talk about different churches and vicar and different things, it's not necessarily the Catholic Church. Now, that being said, there are many, many things that we can learn about ourselves and about our Catholic Church and about specific churches in reading this letter and in kind of thinking about it a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. So the setting for this letter is basically that the patient has continued to attend the same church since his conversion to the faith. And Screwtape doesn't like this. So he advises Wormwood to make the patient a connoisseur of churches for several reasons. What a connoisseur means is someone who tries many different things and kind of considers themselves to be an expert at something. And so these are two of the reasons that Screwtape gives for why they would do this. The first one, it says, the parochial organization should always be attacked because being a place of unity and not of likings, it brings people of different classes and psychology together in the kind of unity that the enemy, God, desires. So the first thing is that they should attack the church in the patient's mind because it brings together this unity. Secondly, in search of a suitable church, this makes the man a critic where God desires us to be pupils. Right, and I think this one especially is one that we can fall into, maybe ourselves, our parents, or friends, or whatnot. When we go to Mass, when C.S. Lewis went to church, when we can assume this fictional patient goes to church, it's not about us. The Mass isn't about, how we feel and that our favorite music is played and that the homily really speaks to us. It is about giving worship to God in the way that He asked us to. And so regardless of the music, regardless of the homily, regardless of who else is at Mass, again, speaking here strictly Catholic, it always is the same Jesus, right? And so if we're a connoisseur of churches and we say, I don't like Saint blah, 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 that church so-and-so, because the priest there, he's really boring, or, they have terrible music, so I'm going to go here where they have much better music, which I like. The problem with this is, again, it makes us to be critics. That literally is being critical of these different parishes, of different churches, of different so on and so forth. Instead of learning, right? As pupils, when we go to Mass, it's our position, an opportunity for us to really learn and to grow in virtue. If I go to a Mass, if I go to the parish that is in my local vicinity, regardless of these different things, that's a very positive thing, right? Now, the only exception here obviously would be if a priest was, not using the proper words during the transubstantiation, was not using the proper, whatnot. It could be an invalid Mass, and so I guess that one would be something that we would probably be careful of. But as long as everything else is correct, then it doesn't really matter where we go because, again, it's not about us. So Screwtape is going into they have records of different churches, and he says there are 2 churches nearby the patient that are promising to him. The first one says the vicar is a man that has been so long engaged in watering down the faith to make it easier for supposedly incredulous unbelieving and hard-headed congregation, that it is now he who shocks his parishioners with his unbelief and not vice versa. So he's oversimplifying. He thinks that his congregation can't handle it, so he's not giving them the true faith, and he's oversimplifying the service, right? We don't need this reading. We don't need these psalms. He just has this kind of well-worked lessons that he goes through again and again and again, right? So this is the first church. The second church, we have Father Spike, right? And that this man has this range of opinions, why he is one day almost a communist and the next day not far from some kind of theocratic fascism. One day a scholastic and the next prepared to deny human reason altogether. So he jumps around to different opinions and philosophies and whatnot. But all of them, right, are under judgment. We see that the link for him is hatred. However, he really does believe, right? And it says, and this may yet mar all. So because Father Spike really does have true belief, I think in opposition to this other vicar, he could ultimately be a dangerous, kind of vicar or pastor for the patient to get involved with. He does say there's one good point with both these churches have in common. They're both party churches. Not that you go and party there, but that they were more similar to factions, saying that this church calls it Mass and this church calls it Holy Communion, when neither party could possibly state the difference between, say, Hooker's doctrine and Thomas Aquinas's in any form which would hold water for 5 minutes. So they're similar to factions because they're just concerned with the exterior and just concerned with what they think is right. And instead of bringing unity, right, that this tears a church apart, right? And I think in our Catholic Church we have, obviously like the Roman Rite, but many people go to the traditional Latin Rite, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but there shouldn't be this division between us, right? So again, going back to that first thing, one of the first things Screwtape says is the church is a place of unity, right? And so obviously demons are trying to come in here and break apart that unity, which means that we need to strive to keep that unity. The very last thing, he mentions Paul's teaching about food and other unessentials, namely that the human without scruples should always give in to the human with scruples. So in Scripture, and particularly 1 Corinthians 8, in those last parts of verses, Paul says, he talks about meat sacrificed to idols. So especially in the early church, the early Christians were all Jewish people. Jesus was a faithful Jew. And so when they first convert, they're trying to figure out, well, what do I keep from my Jewish faith? What is Christian? And so to them, they could not eat meat that had been sacrificed to an idol. For Christians, right, we know that God made everything clean. And so Christians could eat meat sacrificed to an idol. But Paul says, if my eating this meat causes someone else to stumble and fall or to question, then I'm not going to eat meat. Right? So that the one who doesn't have scruples should give that up to the one who does have scruples, right? If I don't really care if we call it Mass or Holy Communion or liturgy, so I should give that up, and whatever you want to call it, I'm going to call it by. So that's this idea of one person bending for the other to meet them where they're at and to not shock them, to not surprise them, again, for things that are non-essential. I'm not talking about, we should change our faith doctrine if someone disagrees with us. I'm just talking about if it's something that is small or, something that is unessential.